Let me get to my man Dan Le Batard and the Dan Le Batard show. It's a couple of things before I get into something. Dan and I have spoken off the air because I went at him before I went on vacation because I didn't appreciate some of the bullshit he was saying on the show. And I still don't. But just because I don't like what you said doesn't mean you're not my friend. We can disagree and still be friends. Dan Le Batard and I have been friends for over 20 years. And any disagreement that we have is not going to change that. I can disagree with him without disrespecting him. And that's what I'm about to do. As I said last week, I did not appreciate when he was saying that me and Skip Bayless, he hates what we did to sports television, acting like he was teaching at Miami U and he wasn't a part of this industry. Got your own damn show. Got your daddy sitting in the middle between you and Bomani Jones half the time or somebody else. Okay? And Bomani Jones, wherever you are, man, I love you, man. I'm rooting for you, and I wish you nothing but the best. You know I'm your brother. I'm sorry that you had to be a casualty of the layoffs and all of that stuff. You know how I feel about you, bro. You had a great show, by the way, on HBO as well. So I'm wishing you nothing but the best. One of the great, great interviewers out there, by the way. Bomani Jones is a special talent. But I digress. Dan Le Batard was talking, and I didn't like some of the shit he was saying. I particularly didn't like him constantly bringing up ESPN and bitching all the time about ESPN. Because I'm just one of those dudes that if a place is good enough for you to collect a check from for years, why are you maligning it every chance you get the second you're gone? I just think that's Bush League. And I said so. But that was just one of the things that I said. And nevertheless, you know, I addressed it. I also talked about Jemele Hill and what she had to say, which I will get it back into in just a couple of minutes, along with Amin El Hassan, and what he had to say. And then Dan came back on and said some of the things that he said and was talking about my problem is really not with him, but with Jemele Hill, which I'll get into in just a second, because ain't nobody running. And then Stu Gotts, who was not there one particular day, came back on the air. Stu Gotts, Dan Le Batard's partner. I've known Stu Gotts for years, got a lot of respect for him. I like him a great deal. Good people. Okay? And Stu Gotts said something that I thought was worthy of a response. He said it on the Dan Le Batard show about myself, about Dan Le Batard, about this business. And I thought our audience needed to hear it. So here is Stu Gotts addressing this whole somewhat brouhaha between me and Dan Le Batard and the business of sports broadcasting and the shows that exist on the air today. Listen to Stu Gotts here.
Dan, I want to talk to you because I'm concerned about you because I've been thinking about this during the break, and we've discussed this for a while now on the show. But journalism, as we know it, as you know it, what you wanted to do when you were a little kid, okay? It has changed.
Yeah.
It has. It's changed, okay? You're not wrong. Stephen A. Smith is not wrong. You have to accurate as long as it's coming from a credible place.
That's true.
If it's Woj, if it's Adam Schefter, if it's you, if it's Diana Rossini, if it's Shams, nobody cares. You might care. Greg Cody might care. Stephen A. Smith might care. But you know what? You all sold out. Every single one of you, okay? Stephen A. Smith jumped inside the circus tent. I don't blame him. Why'd he do it? Because he had to do it. Because the game has changed. You jumped inside the circus tent. You did. You did so with me. Think about that. With me and with Greg Cody every Tuesday, okay? And so you have ditched journalism a long, long time ago because why? Survival of the fittest, Dan.
Stu Gotts, right there, makes very, very, very valid points. The industry did change, and we had to adapt. When I was writing for the Philadelphia Inquirer, I was working in Philadelphia. I was writing for the Philadelphia Inquirer as the beat writer for the Philadelphia 76ers, covering Allen Iverson and Aaron McKee and Dikembe Mutombo, Larry Brown, Pat Croce, Billy King, all of these guys. And I was having a very, very successful career. Very, very successful season. Their run to the NBA Finals. Allen Iverson was sensational. Ended up being a league MVP. Larry Brown was coach of the year. Theo Ratliff goes down early in the season. They end up trading him for Dikembe Mutombo because they knew that they could beat the teams in the East and they was going to need somebody that could conceivably go up against Shaquille O'Neal. And we knew that, wow, that was going to work out because Shaquille was in his prime at the time and the most dominant force we had seen in our lifetime outside of Wilt Chamberlain. And Stephen A. Smith is breaking every story. Any story pertaining to the sport of basketball was coming through me. My star was ascending at an exponential rate. And then the Sixers won in the first round. And then they beat Toronto in the conference semifinals when Allen Iverson and Vince Carter was going back and forth, dropping 50 on each other. It was one of the most spectacular series I've ever seen. It was special. And Vince Carter went to his graduation at the University of North Carolina the morning of Game 7. And they ended up losing. And then he went up against, and then Allen Iverson and the 76ers went up against Milwaukee in the conference finals. Big Dog, Glenn Robinson, Ray Allen, Sam Cassell, and those brothers. It was special. It really, really was. And I was right there sitting courtside front center, witnessing it all. Except all the other reporters were the ones getting the shine. The feature writers, investigative reporters, and stuff like that. And I had been relegated to writing an 800-word article per day. And other than that, my voice was silenced. And it was at that moment that I recognized the advent of sports talk radio and ultimately the proliferating impact of ESPN because of Stuart Scott and various others that were on the airwaves talking. And their voices were resonating and they were becoming household names. And I knew that I could be as good as any of them in my own way. Nobody could duplicate the greatness of Stuart Scott and Dan Patrick and others. But I knew that I could establish my own niche and really, really make it happen. And I knew it wasn't going to be in television, in newspapers. I had to go elsewhere. And that level of adaptation that kicked in ultimately would transfer from newspapers to radio to television. Ultimately from radio and television to the digital stratosphere. Ultimately, the advent of social media came into play. And once that came into play, all of a sudden you saw various other things taking place. And then you saw the podcast world come into play. And during that time, there's a reason that Joe Rogan is at the top of the heap. Because Joe Rogan's been doing this podcast for ages. And he was a visionary, and he saw it before most. There's a reason that Bill Simmons is making noise at Spotify with the huge contract that he has in his own sports network, because he saw the forest from the trees ahead of a lot of us. And he was a visionary. So when Stu Gatz alludes to the changing of the industry as it pertains to people like myself and Dan Le Batard, he's not wrong. Because I saw that you had to modify your game a little bit because all of a sudden the written word didn't matter as much. All of a sudden, the news itself didn't matter 2 minutes after people got it. It mattered when they didn't have it, but the second they had it, within 5 minutes, because of the advent of social media and beyond, everybody had it. And once everybody had it, they didn't care about the news anymore. What they cared about was your perspective on the news. And I saw that as my avenue to transition. And I'm not apologizing for it. Because even though I went from 53,000 to 225,000 as a salaried employee for the Philadelphia Inquirer, let's just say you can't even come to me with 5-figure salaries at this point in time in my life, or 6-figure salaries. It's not even a consideration. I'm at a point in time in my career. I don't even want to discuss anything that's less than 7 figures. That would never have been the case had I stayed in newspapers. For myself or Dan Le Batard. Which is why I thank Stu Gatz for pointing out Dan Le Batard's, dare I say, hypocrisy on this matter. Because that's what it is, Dan. Sorry, buddy. But it is. Now, that doesn't mean I agree with everything that Stu Gatz said. My brother, I've never shoved aside journalism. And to that, I give my brother Dan Le Batard credit. Because he hit the nail on the head when he pointed out, I do report. I do get intel. When I tell you I've talked to somebody and I'm giving you a perspective on the team, if I'm not speculating and I tell you I'm not speculating, it's because I was on the phone or met with people directly involved in the situation who gave me intel on it. That's reporting. I still go to games when I can. I'm still in the locker rooms when I can. I'm still communicating with players and coaches and executives and owners all the time. So in that regard, I appreciate Dan Le Batard acknowledging that about me. And Stu Gatz, respectfully, you missed that one, my brother. Because I'm not one of those people, and maybe it's because I'm simply a black man who knows better. But I don't believe you can be a black man and just run your mouth and be successful. You got to have substance to your arguments, and substance comes from intel, and intel comes from sources, and sources come from networking. These are all the things that I have done for 30 years and counting. I have never stopped, and I will never stop. Ever, as long as I'm breathing and I'm in this industry. And I will put my credibility up against anyone in this business. I don't stop reporting, Stu Gatz. I'm not just spewing opinion. I do sometimes. But a lot of times, I have intel as well. Because I still work, not just spew. Respectfully. Now to get to the point about Dan Le Batard and what I said in regards to Jemele Hill. Before I go any further with that, could y'all please play for me Dan Le Batard talking about me and bringing Jemele Hill, or reminding the audience of what I was alluding to when I brought up Jemele Hill's name. Play that for me, please.
And more objectionable than some of the stuff that we're talking about is his problem's not actually with me. It's with what Jemele Hill said on our platform. And this is more complicated because I'm a much easier target for him to put a name on than going after the black female that he also respects, that he doesn't want to start that back and forth when it's easier to just frame it under me. When I didn't say the thing he objected to, which I understand why he
merely
objected.
Said one of the things that he objected to.
Well, no, I believe that what he objected to, let's play this sound from Jemele on our show. I believe that the strongest objection by him, and I understand being insulted by this, if you're him, is one phrase in the sound we're about to play for you.
Thinking about, my situation is like they were reacting to a moment then. That moment said that people didn't want to hear any political talk, any racial talk, any social justice talk. Not that that was something Mike and I were doing every day on SportsCenter. We weren't. They let a false narrative persist about our show that people just kind of ran away with. They let the idiots in the room control the conversation. People like Clay Travis. That's what happened. And because they allowed those people to direct their course of action, they panicked. And suddenly they were very intentional about the things that they were doing in our show. They didn't want necessarily black voices. And that's how it came off, right? And so because of that, ultimately, we wound up paying the price.
Yep. Couple of things there that need to be broached. First order of business, back to Dan Le Batard. I shouldn't have a problem with him. I should have a problem with Jemele Hill. But he's the easier target. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Le Batard knows better. He knows I don't give a shit about what target is easier or not. I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. And if there are things that I can't say because I work in corporate America and every bit of truth is not for everybody to hear, that's simply making business and judicious decisions. I'm not lying to anybody, and I'm not running from confronting issues. I just recognize that every business is not everybody's business. Dan Le Batard is a perfect example of that. I know plenty of things about Dan Le Batard. And Dan Le Batard knows I know plenty of things about Dan Le Batard that I would never reiterate, because that's his business. Not to mention the fact that he's my friend. And I would never betray his trust or disrespect him like that, as I know he would not with me. It doesn't mean that we lie. It just means that everything ain't meant for everybody to know it here. That's in human life, period, number one. Number two, like I said, ain't nobody running from anything. Number three, Dan Le Batard, my problem shouldn't be with you. You're wrong. Because you provide the platform. Allow me to explain. Jemele Hill, and I appreciate Dan Le Batard playing what she said months ago in context, because I didn't hear that initial part, what she was explaining, how she came to the conclusion of black faces, not black voices. Okay? So I appreciate the context. And Dan Le Batard, if I'm guarded about what I say about Jemele Hill, it's not because she's a tough target. I'm not scared. I happen to love her. She's a friend and a colleague, and I've known her for over 20 years, and I respect the hell out of her. And I know other people who will remain nameless with their sorry, low-life ass selves, who will go after people like her. And I'm not going to do that to her, because she doesn't deserve that. What I was saying is, when she said that, I'm a black man on ESPN. Ryan Clark is. Marcus Spears is. The great Mike Wilbon, who's been a mentor to all of us, is. Stuart Scott was. The great John Saunders was. Damian Woody still is. Bart Scott still is. Kendrick Perkins still is. Louis Riddick still is. Sam Acho still is. Kimberly Martin still is. To say a statement like the network wants black faces but not black voices, who can't understand how that would be interpreted by a black voice on the network? If Jemele Hill is working at Spotify, and I said, Spotify is just interested in black faces, they don't want black voices, is that not a dig at Jemele Hill? Of course it is. Which is why I would never say that. That's my point. As it pertains to her. That's it. And that's all it is. I miss Jemele Hill. Wish she was still at the network. Voice very influential. Mad respect and love for her. By the way, I miss Michael Smith, who's an incredible young talent. I wish he was never gone. But certain things is their business, and if they don't make you privy to it, you shouldn't comment on it. So I never commented, other than I miss them. But that statement took me aback, as it would any black person that's working on the network that heard her say that. That doesn't absolve you, Dan Le Batard. If somebody showed up on this show, the Stephen A. Smith Show, I own and operate this. This is not an ESPN affiliation. I own this show. I pay the bills. I pay these employees. I pay to keep these lights on. I'm building a new studio, by the way, out of my own pocket. This is mine. What if somebody came on the show while Dan Le Batard was working on ESPN and said, quote, you know, there's some people, you know, folks of Cuban descent on the show, and, you know, I mean, they want Cuban faces. They just don't want Cuban voices. And I sat back knowing that Dan Le Batard is on the network, and I say nothing. Not a word. Not a challenge, not a pushback, nothing. I just let that slide. how would you feel? You know me well enough to know how I would feel. And I know you well enough to know how you would feel. That's why that would a person would have received pushback. And I believe that the thing that camouflages Dan Le Batard's judgment from time to time is his eagerness to be ultra critical of ESPN. Now, in fairness to Dan Le Batard, he has been critical of ESPN while he was on the airwaves there, more so than most. Absolutely true. He's not lying about that. He's a real one. But you could be real, and you could also be real unwise and real foolish. Just as real as you can be really authentic. Just because you were brave and unfiltered and devoid of hesitancy when it came to calling out the network doesn't mean you're always right. And I'd like to remind Dan Le Batard, there's a few things that the network could say about you, if it wanted to. But it never did. There's a few things that I could say about you that I wouldn't, because I love you. And I'm not talking about what you say and all of this other stuff. I'm saying when you sit up there and you say the problem is with Jemele Hill, it's not really with you. That is not accepting responsibility for the platform you have available to you. I'm your brother. You're mine. There is no one that can come on this show or First Take or anywhere else and just talk in a flippant manner about faces but not voices, indirectly throwing shade upon you, and I don't remind them, wait a minute, Dan Le Batard's there. What you talking about? That's all I'm saying. So for those of you out there, don't look at it as shady. Don't look at it as Dan Le Batard and I beefing. We don't like each other. We love each other. That's my brother. We good. We just respectfully disagree on that particular instance. Just like I disagreed with Jemele Hill and her statement. But that's my sister. We don't talk much. We always could when we see each other. She's an incredible talent. I miss her. And I respect the hell out of her. I just felt that statement didn't accord me and other black folks at ESPN the respect we deserved. That's all. That's it. And she'll correct it, or she'll stand by it, or she'll do whatever she's going to do. I just saw it and it popped up and I had never seen it before. That was my only issue. That's all, nothing more. But make no mistake, the buck stops with you, Dan, on your show. And it's sad that I have to remind you, it's your show. Just like Highly Questionable was your show. Just like the Dan Le Batard show on ESPN was your show. You didn't debate and you didn't do this and you didn't do that. Really? Go back and watch tapes of yourself, my brother. Or just listen to Stu Gotts. He already told you. You sold out. Which means you in the muck and mire with the rest of us. Don't act like you some dove flying around while all of us are smeared. If we stink, you stink too. But we don't stink. Because you also said that First Take and dumb topics or whatever. Yo, y'all. And I don't know some of the people on your show. I've never seen them a day in my life. I don't know who they are. But to sit up there and to challenge the content, we talking about the Dallas Cowboys all the time. We're talking about LeBron James all the time. First Take has 15 different segments per day. We talk about everything. We talk about football. We talk about basketball. We talk about race. We talk about social justice issues. We talk about a whole bunch of stuff. First Take is the culture. We're responsible in large part for the culture that has taken place, that has shifted in this nation. You know how many voices have been created through First Take. You know how many black people show up on First Take? You know how many women show up on First Take? I said, look at First Take. Look at the diversity of opinions, of perspectives, of thoughts, of intel. The hell are you talking about? Respectfully, to anybody that says, you don't know what the fuck you talking about. You don't have a clue. One of the greatest things ESPN has ever done is create the platform that is First Take. You may not like the show sometimes. You might not have liked it when Skip Bayless was talking about Tebow every day, every segment. I didn't like it either. That's why we changed. But don't tell me that Skip Bayless ain't a great talent on television. Don't tell me that he's never discussed serious issues. Gender issues, transgender issues, racism, misogyny, xenophobia, even politics. What are y'all talking about? What are you talking about? Is the audience dumb? Everybody out there dumb? We number one for 11 and a half years because we dumb? You know that Damian Woody scored over 1,600 on his SATs? Ryan Clark, dumb. Molly Karam, dumb. Louis Riddick, dumb. Dan Orlovsky, dumb. Mina Kimes, brilliant Mina Kimes, dumb. Jeff Saturday, before he went to took the Indianapolis coach job, dumb. Mad Dog Russo, a Hall of Fame broadcaster, dumb. Dave Roberts, who's been an executive for decades, dumb. Norby Williamson, who's been one of the elite executives in the business for decades, dumb. They all worked under John Skipper, Dan Le Batard. Your partner, our former boss, who I profoundly respect and appreciate. He had dumb people working under him. Bob Iger appointed him. Bob Iger, dumb, one of the greatest executives in American history. George Bodenheimer, the former president, was also one of the people that appointed him. George Bodenheimer, a brilliant executive and one of the most decent human beings you'll ever find on the planet Earth, dumb. They were dumb. I don't usually spend my time addressing my colleagues because I respect all of them. But I ain't going to take that shit from y'all. I'm the dumb one. I'm the one who got left back in the fourth grade with a first grade reading level. I'm the one who had undiagnosed dyslexia. I'm the one who still reads things twice because I still don't have full confidence of my comprehension from time to time because I still have the residue of when I was younger and I got left back. I'm the dumb one compared to everybody I mentioned. My producers, former ones like Antoine Lewis, present ones like Pete McConville, Tom DeCourty, and James Dunn, and David McKinnon and these brothers. Working with Greeny, working with the brilliant Mike Wilbon, friends with Tony Kornheiser for years. The Hall of Famer Mike Breen, Mark Jackson, the incomparable Doris Burke. Those are my colleagues. I'm the dumb one compared to all of them. And I'm number one. Dumb? That's what y'all said about First Take? That's why we coming for all y'all asses. That's what I meant when I said y'all done started some shit. I'm not going to sit here and take that from y'all no more. You ain't going to talk about our show like that. You ever look at your show? I would never say that about y'all, and I ain't saying that about you now. I'm just saying, don't act like you capable of throwing stones like you ain't living in a glass house when you open that Pandora's box. That's all I'm saying, Dan. That's all I'm saying. Ain't nobody backing up. I would never, ever, ever in a million lifetimes sit up there and call your content dumb. You're just wrong. You're just wrong.